There was a man who lived many lives, though he never understood it. Each life began as if it were the first, each death as though it were the end. But it wasn't. At first, he was a child, a boy with no memories beyond his simplest pleasures. His life was unremarkable. Mornings spent with the smell of fresh bread, afternoons spent with friends who seemed no different from the others in his small town. He was loved, but only in the ways children are loved. He felt time stretch in front of him, empty and full, both at once. He was 11 when it happened. The car came barreling down the street, the screech of tires drowning out everything else. His body collided with the asphalt, his head cracked open like a fragile egg. The pain was brief, unbearable, yet fleeting. And then there was nothing. Nothing until his eyes snapped open again. The world around him was unfamiliar, but he recognized the feeling, the softness of his own skin, the stillness of his mind. He was a child again, younger this time, a toddler. At first he couldn't understand. He didn't know what had happened, only that it had. There were flashes, snippets of a life he was sure he hadn't yet lived. A deep sense of déjà vu gnawed at him, but no answers. He lived again, a child once more, with only the knowledge of a life gone wrong, a life wasted. But he was still naive enough to believe this new beginning might be different. It wasn't. His second life was filled with brighter colours, new places, new faces. Yet the shadows never fully receded. The memory of the accident lingered like a lingering cough. This time it was different. He noticed things, small things. The way people's eyes flickered when they looked at him, the whisper of the wind on the nights when the stars felt too close. He felt the weight of something he couldn't yet explain. Years passed and the world grew colder, sharper. He moved through his childhood with an uncanny understanding of life's fleeting nature. His choices were precise, guided by some invisible hand, the feeling that he had already been through this before, but there was no escape. He died in his second life at 23, in an alley. Blood, dark and thick, pouring from a wound in his chest. He hadn't seen the knife come. The suddenness of it knocked the air from his lungs. Once again, the world turned black, and once again he awoke, smaller, younger, with the same memories of lives that weren't his own. A different town, a different set of parents, but the same relentless ache in his chest, the same suffocating weight of knowing that death was never far behind. The years grew crueler. He lived through a fire that consumed his body, through a drowning in a forgotten river, through a violent crash when a plane's engine tore apart mid-flight. Each death was more grotesque than the last. Each life he grew colder. His mind hardened, but so did the world around him, twisting in ways that he couldn't ignore. The horrors of the world were clearer now, the dark undercurrent of life revealed. Each death seared into him, each resurrection leaving behind a scar deeper than the last. There was no escaping it. There was no escaping himself. Every life came with the same darkness, the knowledge that death was waiting, hiding behind every moment. And with each new life, the years passed faster, the memories growing sharper, the suffering more intense. He awoke next as a teenager, locked in a room with no windows, no door. He had no memory of how he had gotten there, but he knew what was coming. The faint smell of something decaying lingered in the corners. His fingers trembled as he realized he was going to die here. The darkness would come for him. It always did. And it did. He was trapped, starving, screaming into the void, and the walls closed in. The pattern never broke. The terror The longing, the suffocating certainty that it was all pointless, all futile. He died again and again, murdered in dark alleys, caught in the jaws of machines, stabbed in moments of blind rage. Each death was an echo of the last, a loop, one that he could never escape, no matter how many lives he lived. One day, he found himself older than he had ever been before. A man in his 60s, grey hair and tired eyes. His body ached, but it was nothing compared to the burden in his soul. Every moment was heavy with the weight of experience. He could feel it, every choice, every misstep. The knowledge he had gained over the centuries, the understanding of how fragile life truly was, how it could all vanish with a single breath. And yet, death never came easy. The cancer crept in like a thief in the night, silent but consuming. His body betrayed him, each organ failing in slow succession, as if it too had had enough. He withered away in a sterile hospital room, the last remnants of his life slipping through his fingers. But even then, when the final breath left his body, when the monitors flatlined and the darkness seemed to swallow him whole, he woke again. He was a child, a boy, younger than before. His heart thundered with fear, his small hands trembling as he clutched the edges of his bed. The memories were clearer now, brighter, more vivid. He remembered every single life, the pain, the loneliness, the knowledge that each death was just the beginning of something worse. But the world outside, it had changed. There was a coldness to it now, a sinister twist in every face, in every shadow that clung to the corners of his vision. The years stretched before him, endless and grim. The faces of his parents were different, distorted as though no matter what body he took, they were never quite real. He couldn't escape them, couldn't escape the world. This time something was different. He felt it. A shift in the air, a sound that didn't belong, a movement that shouldn't be there. The walls of his room began to tremble. His pulse quickened, racing faster than it ever had before. And then he saw it. In the corner of his room, hidden in shadow, something moved. Something that had been with him since the first life. Something that had followed him through every death. It had always been there, waiting, watching. But now it was closer. The edges of his vision blurred, his body began to tremble uncontrollably. The knowledge he had once tried so hard to hold on to slipped from his mind, fading into the abyss. And just before the darkness overtook him, he realized the terrible truth. There was no escape. He was trapped in the cycle forever. Reborn again and again, each time a new child with the memories of 1,000 deaths. But it was never enough. The horror never ended, the walls closed in. And once again, he woke.